talking about changes, they can be scary. What we have planned for tomorrow may not happen, not to mention things that we have planned for weeks or months or even years later. On the other hand, since changes are part and parcel of life, they are inevitable, we have to deal with them. Otherwise, we can't even live a life that we want. We need a good strategy to manage changes effectively. And in fact, this is a very big topic. So big that it has intrigued the human race since the beginning of time. And in this video, I would like to introduce two books, two very old books, that talk about changes and how we can deal with them effectively. See if you can get some inspirations from there. The first book is the Tao Te Ching, written by Lao Tzu some 2,500 years ago, so it's old enough. The other book is I Ching. Some of you may know it as I Ching, which is even older than the Tao Te Ching. The two books share a same philosophy, so when we are talking about strategies, they are very similar. All right, so let me just introduce what is said in the Tao Te Ching first, and I would like to highlight one of the chapters. That's chapter 42. It is a very interesting chapter, but for those who are reading it for the first time, you may find it pretty perplexing. It is a very profound chapter, but it's very short. It's difficult to imagine. There are only 25 characters, and since it's so short, I can afford to read the original text before I do the translation. 道生一，一生二，二生三，三生万物，万物负阴而抱阳，充气以为和。Let me just translate the first part of the chapter first. Tao generates one, one generates two, two generates three, and three generates the myriads of things. What does it mean? A lot of people find it to be very confusing. What does Lao Tzu say when he's talking about the one, two, three, and the myriads of things? In fact, he's talking about how the universe developed from nothing to what we know it to be today. And for that, I would like to bring in I Ching to say the same thing, but in a slightly different way. Now, the universe that we know today, before it was formed, there had been nothing. I Ching described it as 无极. And then came one fine day, there was a massive explosion. Upon the explosion, the universe was formed. And this is what I Ching described as Tai Chi, a Tai Chi. The Tai Chi exercise that we see people performing in parts. It is exactly the same word, but here in I Ching it has a much bigger meaning. Tai Chi is one, and then following the emergence of the universe, there are the heaven and earth. Heaven and earth, they form two, what Lao Tzu says. In fact, when we're talking about heaven and earth, we are talking about the yin and yang energy. Heaven is yang and earth is yin. So, from one we have two, and then in I Ching it says that from two, because of the yin yang, so we have four, and then you have 8 trigrams, and then you have the 64 hexagrams. And this is what you see in the 64 hexagram diagram. Can you imagine that in this diagram it depicts the likely scenarios of changes in the universe, and it can number trillions of them. So how do we deal with the changes? Now, both I Ching and Tao Te Ching talk about changes, from 1 to 2 and then to 3 to like what I Ching says, 64 hexagrams and trillion of possible scenarios of changes. And what Lao Tzu says is, it forms the myriads of things. So how we can deal with, the endless changes in the universe? The Lao Tzu's, the solution that Lao Tzu suggests is very simple. Don't look at, the changes. It will be very, very confusing. It will be very confusing. Go back to the origin and look at the yin yang. That's the second part of the chapter. What he says is that within everything there's yin and yang, and what you have to do is simply to blend the yin and yang to find a harmony. And what he says is that when you can find a harmony, you find a solution. So it's as simple as that. Similar things are found in I Ching. What I Ching tells us is that, number one, there are changes, as what we see in the 64 hexagrams. It can be overwhelming. But at the same time, I Ching also let us know that although in the 64 hexagrams, they can be very, very complex, what you can find inside each hexagram is actually what you can find at the very, very beginning, the primary form of existence, which is the yin and yang. So if you can understand how the yin and yang work, then you'll be able to handle them effectively. So what I Ching says is, number one, there are changes in the world. In Chinese, that's called 变异. But they are constant in the changes. What it says is 不易, unchanging. That's what is known as the immutable law of the universe. And in Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu call it Chang. It's also constant, and the meaning is also constant. And the third thing that I Ching advises is that there are changes, but there are also something unchanging. So what you have to do is to find out the unchanging in the changing to come up with a simple solution. So the third piece of advice that I Ching gives us is make things simple. So here you are, the solution to the means of changes in the universe, that is to keep things simple, and you'll find a solution. And this is exactly what Wu Wei, or effortless doing, is teaching us to do. That is to find the principle underlying everything that we do, and then we go with the flow of nature, right on the flow of nature, and tap into the power of nature to get things done. We make things simple, but we do things more effectively, although we don't necessarily have to put in a lot more effort. In fact, we must not put in unnecessary effort, because it's going to spoil the beauty of nature, and to spoil the flow of nature, and we are not going to get better results. So ultimately, what the two books tells us is, know the principle underlying the changes, and then make things simple, and you'll find a good solution, and you would know how to handle things in the most effective manner. I hope you find the explanation useful. We are going to talk more about how we can make things simple by applying the principles introduced by the Tao Te Ching and I Ching, and that's what I have for you in this video. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation as much as I do. I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much for watching.